Welcome once again to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life. And we're talking about DraftKings, of course. Another one of those Mondays where it's a mid-sized slate, not a lot of great pitching options. There are some teams that you want to get some exposure to against some bad pitchers, as seems to be the trend. So we're going to go ahead and dive into it here. At the top, we covered a lot of these pitchers, all the ones that are even viable in the pitcher nail down. So if you're looking for just pitcher breakdown, check that one out also on the same YouTube channel. But starting at the top, Lance Lynn, you and I both agree. I mean, he is your safest option. He's also pretty pricey. You don't love paying $11,000 for a guy like Lynn. He has decent strikeout upside, but the Reds don't strike out a ton. But you got to anticipate he has the best floor. So he's your top option, $11,100. And then we talked about a couple other options. I like Edison Volquez against the Indians. He's been very good against left-handed batters at 270 WOBA allowed. I think he's an okay option. And then Anibal Sanchez, I think we both kind of agreed is more of a tournament play because he's pretty volatile. If his price was maybe $8,500, $9,000, you'd consider him your cash games. But at $10,200, like you said on the pitcher nail down, you want more upside with a guy like this, and he just really doesn't have that type of upside at his current price.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing about him today is he's facing Tampa Bay, who hasn't been putting any runs on the board, which is good. I mean, I don't mind him. He's probably like somewhere in the 2-3 range of cash game plays today. I mean, he's pretty hard to argue with how bad the rest of the slate is. Like Chris Heston's 9,500. I think I'd probably rather pay $700 more for Sanchez than play Heston, despite Heston being the bigger favorite there. I mean, it's a really tough pitching situation today where I don't feel great about anyone. Alex Wood on DraftKings is a guy I like in that mid-range price area. 7,100. Not a favorite, though, which is always tough. Not going to get much run support from Atlanta, but Baltimore does strike out a ton, so there's some nice upside there. Wood's a guy that, despite not being great this season, has pitched pretty deep into games and been pretty consistent. I mean, he's averaging 6 2/3 innings pitched about on the season, and that's with a couple games where he's left early because he's gotten rocked or whatever. But I mean, the big problem with him is he hasn't shown much upside, and I think he does have some decent upside against Baltimore. If he has his pitches working today, they strike out more than all but 4 teams in the majors right now against lefties. So he's pretty hard to argue with, but again, not a guy that I really want to go out there and say, yeah, I'm going to just put this guy in every lineup and feel really great about it. There really isn't one of those guys today outside of maybe Lance Lynn, which even that in that case might not be something I feel great about. Although it is nice that all those Reds guys are coming out of Coors where they were just hitting really well, and now they got to face Lynn in St. Louis, which is a nice setup for him.
Yeah, and plus, who knows? Maybe Jay Bruce gets traded before 7 o'clock, and then, I mean, you saw he's your BVP guy of the day, 14 and 28 off of Lynn. So, you know, if he gets traded, maybe the Reds give everybody a day off to kind of recuperate. We've seen those things before when you're kind of cleaning house. Maybe they bring up some AAA guys, and we've seen some pretty bad lineups out of the Reds at times. So if they trot out a subpar lineup, then I mean he makes for an even better play. But like we said, he's got to be your safest option tonight. And then Kyle Hendricks, the other guy. Speaking of teams getting away from Coors, we know how good Colorado is at home. We also know how bad they are on the road. No wind to help them in Chicago today. And Hendricks has been very good. I mean, even in his last start, giving up 5 earned runs, still got 9 strikeouts, ended up with 16.1 DK points. And his last 5, 16.1, 17.8, 20.2, 28.9, 27.1. So, you know, this is a very bad team on the road, and I think that he's a great option as well.
Yeah, I have a hard time arguing that either, especially with this whole landscape tonight. If we're going to look at some cheap guys, I think Joe Kelly is a nice favorite against the White Sox, who are a team that struggles. Other guy that I like a decent amount cheap-wise is why am I blanking on this right now? Who's the other cheap guy I like today? Gausman. Yeah, that's the other cheap guy I like at pitcher. I mean, those are GPP only plays on DraftKings. I like putting second pitcher in GPP at times if I can put together a hitting lineup I like, but outside of that, I mean, I'm probably paying up for someone like Lynn in cash games for the most part, and maybe one of these other guys like Wood or something like that.
Yeah, that seems like the way to go tonight, and Lynn easily going to be the most heavily owned pitcher on the slate tonight.
Yeah, even at that price, I can't see him being under 40%, I think is probably a good mark. He might even be higher than that, honestly, in cash games, just because there's no one else you can feel good about.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you die by Lance Lynn in a subpar performance tonight, everyone else is probably dying with you. So
Yeah,
don't feel
exactly.
too bad about it. Catcher options: Buster Posey gets Kyle Loesch. You're going to be hard-pressed finding a better scenario for a guy like Buster Posey. Kyle Loesch, obviously it's a pitcher's park, but Giants crush right-handed pitching. Loesch has already given up 13 home runs and a 375 WOBA to right-handed batters this season. I mean, for me, Posey's by far the top option, and I really don't think any of these other guys are even close.
No, I don't either. If I'm not playing him, I'm probably going really cheap. AJ Pierzynski is probably the next most expensive guy I would look at. Lefty facing a righty in Gaussman. I don't feel too bad about that. Pierzynski's been hitting 5.6 for the most part. A couple other cheap guys I don't mind. Blake Swire against John Danks is a fine play, but hitting ninth in the order for 2,800 really doesn't get me too excited. But I mean, there's only like 4 catchers on the board today that hit higher than like 8 in the order, so
Yeah.
we're not in a great spot here. If you are looking for a guy that hits near the top of the order, John Jaso does have to face Anibal Sanchez, but he's been hitting first, and he's only 3,200. I think that's probably another guy I would look at if I needed to go any other direction. But I'd be paying for Posey as much as possible tonight.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then there is one cheap guy who Buck Showalter said he should be back in catching today, but he's officially day-to-day. Matt Wieters is only $2,600. You don't love the matchup, but, I mean, at $2,600, power in that ballpark, you got to like that matchup.
Yeah, Wieters has been really, really good from the right side of the plate, though. So, I mean, that's a really great play if he's in the lineup. I mean, even if he's not 100%, I think you can feel pretty good about that. He's dealing with a stiff back, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, that's a little concerning even if he's in the lineup. But at 2,600, like you mentioned, that's built into his price because he's a 3,400 guy at worst, probably, if he's healthy.
Yeah, and I imagine he's fairly healthy because the little blurb that I read said that Showalter is expecting him not only to play but to catch. So you got to imagine he's pretty close to 100%. And he shouldn't be DHing either, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right, first base. Got to love Paul Goldschmidt against a lefty, but he's $6,000. With the state of tonight's pitching, like we mentioned, you're almost forced to pay up for at least one of these top-end guys, so it's going to be tough to play a guy like Goldschmidt, but you got to love the spot for him, though, against the lefty in Montgomery, who had those couple really good starts, but has really been struggling over his past few. And then outside of that, you get a 9-run total in Texas with the Yankees against the Rangers. To share is $5,500, and you got to like him, but you can get Prince Fielder for $1,000 cheaper. So I think Prince Fielder at $4,500 against Ivan Nova, who has just not been good this season since coming back up. 356 WOBA to lefties so far. I think Fielder is probably my favorite play when you consider price tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, outside of Goldschmidt, I think it's pretty hard to argue with Fielder over anybody else. I mean, maybe Freddie Freeman against Gaussman is another lefty there that I think you can go with, but I think Fielder just has a lot more upside because of how much better the Texas offense is around him.
Yep.
And so that's probably the way I'm going to go. Outside of that, I don't mind Victor Martinez if you're not pitching Carnes, which I don't think a ton of people will be doing. Mitch Moreland's another guy, but I just like Fielder a lot better for $700 more, so I don't think I'll be using him on DraftKings. Which I'm so tired of him not having outfield eligibility on DraftKings because I love stacking Rangers all the time against righties. Outside of that, if you're looking for some cheaper guys, I mean, there's not a lot at first base, and you know I'm not a big cheap guy at first base, but Adam LaRoche, I guess, would probably be my one option facing a righty in Kelly for only $2,700.
Yeah, I like that. I like Brandon Belt also at $39. And then one more guy, kind of middle range, not exactly cheap, but Mike Napoli's been hitting the ball really well since the All-Star break. And with a lefty on the mound, maybe we see David Ortiz get the night off as his reward for that huge game he had last night. He doesn't hit lefties particularly well, so maybe Napoli moves up in the lineup because we've seen him as low as 8th recently, and maybe he gets moved up to 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
So, that'd make him a decent play in that high total tonight. Second base options. Really love Rougned Odor at $3,800 against Ivan Nova. I mean, the guy's just been absolutely destroying the ball. Josh was talking about on the earlier podcast today. He has an ISO of over 300 since coming up. WRC plus over 200. I mean, he's hitting home runs now. 3 home runs in his last 4 games. So that price is way too low for this scenario for him tonight. I can't imagine how he won't be my highest owned second baseman on DraftKings tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to argue with. There's no one else I'm really that excited about at second base. Joe Panic is probably the other guy that I like the most against Los, but he's only 100 less than Odor, so it's going to keep me off of him a little bit. I also don't mind Colton Wong, but for $4,000, I'd just rather play Odor or Panic, I think, is my biggest concern there. Jason Kipnis is too expensive for me against a guy as good as Volquez. We mentioned that Seattle's facing a lefty, so Cano's out of the question tonight. Jace Peterson's 3,200 against Gaussman. I don't know why I like so many of these Atlanta guys, but it's not a team that I feel great about, other than the fact that Gaussman can blow up at times. So I'd rather spend up and just go with one of these guys around 4,000 is the way I'm looking at second base today, which is not usually how I look at second base. So
yeah, there's one guy that's under 3,000 who's been hitting well. You're certainly not chasing the power because he's not a power hitter, but he has homered in his last 2 games. Carlos Sanchez, you're more looking at the 5 hits over his last 2 games, yep. But at $2,400, second base or shortstop, I think he's a fine punt option if you have to punt. And then as we transition from second to third, Matt Duffy at $3,600, second base, third base eligibility. I love him tonight.
Another guy like that, Aaron Hill, against the lefty in Montgomery, second base, third base. I don't particularly love him at either position, but 2,700 is a guy you can consider for some salary relief if you need it.
Yeah, especially if he ends up batting around second in the order, right ahead of Goldschmidt. All you got to do is get on base, and you're going to come home eventually. So,
yeah.
Third base options, it's Alex Rodriguez's 40th birthday, and he just so happens to lead the majors in home runs on his birthday with 5, tied with a couple other guys. So there's your narrative for the day. Coming off his 3-homer game last time out, $5,600 though. You got to pay birthday boy price, so I'm not sure I'll be doing that. But in GPPs, he's an okay option. Chris Bryant's probably going to be a pretty popular play at $4,600 against De La Rosa, who's been giving up a ton of home runs. Hasn't been what he's done throughout his career. He's actually been, pretty good against righties overall this year, but giving up a lot of home runs, like I said. So you got to like him. And then if you're not playing Alex Wood, Manny Machado at $4,600, really just always in play.
Yeah, that's really hard to argue with for the most part. Chris Bryant's a guy that I like quite a bit against a lefty in De La Rosa. That's probably the guy I'm going with the most, although I don't mind Alex Rodriguez either, although $5,600 is just a ridiculous price. He's been red hot, though, and he's crushed lefties this season. It's a 9 over-under. There's so much to like there, but $5,600 is an awfully steep price to pay for a guy like Alex Rodriguez right now. Mike Moustakas is a guy I don't mind for $4,100, but I'd rather just pay $500 more for Bryant for the most part. If I'm looking for like a really cheap guy, there's not a ton at third base, except some guys that I'm looking at shortstop, like usual. Andrew Romine is a guy that I mention all the time against righties. He's been hitting 6-7 in the order for Detroit. Tyler Saladino, I'm going to keep mentioning until he gets above 2,500. He's been hitting second for the White Sox lately. They don't score a ton of runs, but for 2,500, both these guys can play shortstop and third base. I assume we can kind of transition into shortstop now, where I prefer them a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I'm going to keep looking for guys 2,500 and below on DraftKings at shortstop when there's not really anyone that I absolutely love at shortstop today.
No, I really like Xander Bogaerts at $3,600. If he's probably the mostly the pricey option I'll go to. Obviously, Hanley Ramirez, who's still not actually a shortstop. At $4,200, you consider him against a lefty, a bad lefty, and John Danks, of course. And then Brandon Crawford in tournaments, I like him at $3,900 because Kyle Loesch he's just god awful against lefties and righties.
Yeah, I think Hanley Ramirez is probably my top play. I don't love him, but at $4,200 against Danks, like you mentioned, Danks is a guy we love targeting. I don't mind Bogaerts either, but I'd probably go with the power potential of Hanley if I was paying up at shortstop. Outside of that, I'm avoiding too low against a tough righty away from Coors. Don't really like that very much. Probably going to avoid Lindor against Volquez also. If I was looking for one other cheap option, I might look at Starlin Castro, but he just hasn't been very good. $2,900 is kind of hard to argue with, but I'd probably either go cheaper or probably spend up on Hanley or something like that.
Yeah, I agree.
But I really think Saladino is probably my top play if he's hitting second in the order again. At $2,500, hitting in the top of the order, I have a hard time passing that up for the most part.
Yeah, and like you said, there's not a whole lot of opportunity cost. You're not missing out on much by paying down at shortstop because it's a pretty weak position tonight. So
yeah, based on my luck with Hanley Ramirez, I'm missing out on an 0 for 4 night.
yeah, exactly. I've been in that boat plenty of times also. Outfield options, I don't really feel like it's necessary to pay up. You got to like Nelson Cruz against the lefty at $5,000. He's been destroying the ball. He's getting a lot of hits too, not just hitting for power. So have to like that. Hunter Pence against Kyle Loesch, one of my favorite plays overall out there at $4,700 as well. I'm really not targeting these Colorado bats on the road because they're still priced a little bit higher than I'd like them to be. I mean, you've got Carlos Gonzalez, who's 4,100. It's an okay price, but I'm not playing him outside of Coors. I feel like he's going to have way higher ownership than he rightfully should in this matchup because he's been so hot. So I think he's an okay GPP option, but I don't think that he'll be low owned. So I don't think there's much edge to be had there by playing him in your GPPs. But then Adam Jones at 4,000 against a lefty, he seems way too cheap on just about every site tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I don't mind any of these Red Sox guys against Danks. I can list them all off here if we need to, but I mean, Betts and Hanley Ramirez are probably my favorite two outfielders there. Let's see. There were a couple other guys I like that you didn't mention. Jason Hayward, I don't mind against Iglesias if he's hitting fifth again. But 4,200 isn't a price I'm super excited to pay for him. Nelson Cruz, you mentioned against Robbie Ray. There's concerns about all those lefties in the lineup hitting around him, but he should have a really nice night on his own at least. 5,000 isn't a super restrictive price tag for him with how cheap the pitchers are today if you're not pitching two of the aces. Nolan Reimold is another guy that I'm pretty interested in today, only 2,000, facing a lefty. He's been rock solid against lefties this season, has shown off some power. He's probably going to be in a lot of my lineups if he's in the lineup. I never really know what the Orioles are going to do against lefties because they do have a lot of righty bats. But I think if he's in the lineup hitting second, which I think he has been all three of the last three games that they've faced a lefty, I'm going to have a hard time passing him up for 2,000. Another guy that's 2,000 is Daniel Nava against Danks. He's hitting eighth in the lineup for the Red Sox, but for 2,000 against a pretty weak lefty, I don't mind Nava, who's crushed lefties in his career.
Yeah, that's a good call there, definitely. A couple other middling options for you here. Dexter Fowler is the guy with some power and speed. We know these Colorado catchers are awful at throwing out runners at 3,900. I think he's got nice speed and power upside there. And then either one of the Texas lefties there at 3,700, Josh Hamilton or Shin-Soo Choo. I don't mind either one. I think Choo's probably more of a cash game play. Hamilton more the GPP guy if you're looking at those two. But I think they're both in the fine spot. And then your cheap power, Trumbo, as always, against the lefty. Yep. I like targeting him in GPPs as well.
Yeah. One other relatively cheap power guy, I think Chris Young for the Yankees, has had a good career against lefties. Terrible against righties, but a good career against lefties. Yeah. And he's been hitting fifth in the order against lefties when they have to shift some of these left-handed bats they have at the top of their order down a little bit. So I don't mind Young at 3,200. I wish he was a little bit cheaper like he is on FanDuel, but I think he's a decent GPP play.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. You always got to consider him against when he's in the lineup against lefty, especially if he bats second or fifth, because you got to like those spots as well. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.